Beating the market. It's the goal of most active investors to find stocks that are outperforming the benchmark indexes. But finding winning stocks can be tough, especially when market conditions are volatile. So, what are some tools and strategies that can help investors? On this IBD Explains, we ask, how do you spot stocks that are outperforming the S&P 500? Here with me to help break things down is IBD's personal finance and management editor, Matt Krantz. So, Matt, when we look at stocks that are outperforming in the market, I would think that it's really difficult for investors to spot the top stocks in any given month. Hindsight is always 2020. But, if we can take a step back first, and can you tell me, how do you know when a stock is outperforming an index like the S&P 500?
Yeah, it's real handy. Like a lot of people look at sectors, and we like to look at see how the 11 S&P sectors are doing relative to the S&P 500. We can take it a step further by looking also at how the individual components of the sectors in the S&P 500 are doing, and just benchmark them for the month period against the S&P 500. And it's an interesting way to look at what different types of stocks are doing the best during that very important period of time.
And what are some approaches or indicators that investors can key on to help spot stocks that are poised to outperform?
Yeah, so I know some people get frustrated when they see this kind of thing, and they always say, "Oh man, now you're telling me that was the best stock in November. Thanks a lot." But I think part of it is it's looking at the trend. So I'm going to use a football analogy. Just because the Dallas Cowboys won this week doesn't mean you want to bet all your money on them next week, but it does highlight a trend. If you see the Cowboys winning consistently or every other week, and that's why football fans like to look at football teams on a weekly basis. The same thing goes for stocks. It's instructive to look at how they're doing in each month, but that doesn't mean you want to base your entire performance or your entire portfolio on how one month went. But if you see a repeat performance, it's great. It can also highlight winners. So a lot of people spotted the AI rally in kind of the early summer or the midsummer. But what you can really do when you look at the winners in the month is you can see NVIDIA was clearly the pull ahead winner there. And so that's why it's kind of good to go beyond the index.
That's great information. And aside from trends, are there any technical or fundamental indicators that can really help investors find these stocks when they're making their watch list?
Absolutely. And that's a good distinction between value investors and growth investors. So growth investors love to see kind of momentum, and they want to see stocks that are getting the attention of other investors. And they don't worry so much about the price. They're just looking for acceleration in stock price, in performance versus the moving averages, earnings, sales growth, all that. On the other hand, value investors, they're looking for stuff that's losing momentum. So things that's cheap or things that are lagging against the market. So that can be an important distinction between the two types of investors.
Now, this is for individual stocks, and you mentioned looking at the sector trend and maybe using that as a way to get in and spot some of these market leaders. But for investors trying to find which sectors are hot, how can you spot when an industry group is starting to rev up and make a move?
IBD is really handy for that. We've got our industry groups, and we keep close track. The print edition has an excellent chart that can show you which sectors are pulling ahead and which are behind. We also do sector leader features, and we have a sector feature that I write every day that kind of shows trends in different sectors, what's moving, what's not moving, what's working, what's not. And it's can be really, really helpful for people to kind of look beyond just the big S&P or big Dow and drill down and see how these individual stocks are doing as well.
Now, you mentioned something important, that it's not really maybe healthy for investors to base all their performance in how a particular stock has done in a given month. But when you spot stocks that are poised to outperform, does that mean that you automatically buy them? What are some things that investors can consider before adding these stocks to their portfolios?
That's a great question. And, we've got our can slim techniques where we really focus on what you need to look at before you buy a stock. You want to make sure the stock looks right. You want to make sure it's trending right. You want to make sure it fits the criteria that fits your portfolio. But you also want to see earnings growth. Just because you see a money losing stock do great one month, let's remember GameStop, it did great one month, but it didn't have the fundamentals behind it. And that's been a kind of a sad story. So you want to look at things that are doing well in the market, but also that have the goods behind it. And that's the fundamentals.
You talked about the roller coaster of GameStop and the meme stock rally. But when we talk about the roller coaster of the market, when it goes through its ebbs and flows, Can you tell investors, is it possible to make gains when the market is maybe taking a breather?
It's a great point. It's another reason I love looking at the individual winners each month, because I think people lose sight. Just because the market went down in September does not mean that every stock went down in September. I think, yes, absolutely. If you own the S&P 500, you lost 5 to 6%. But there were big winners. There were two stocks just in the month of September that gained 10% or more. So it's just a reminder. I think with ETFs, they're great. I love them. I think a lot of times people look at now the market as a whole. They look at these giant baskets of stocks. But remember, these baskets are made up of a lot of individual eggs, and they all can act very differently. And that's why it's important each month to check in and see which are doing the best and which ones are doing the worst.
Well, Matt, great information as always, and we really appreciate your insights today.
Thank you so much.